The hidden laws of wealth. Few ever learn. Most people dream of wealth as if it were a finish line, a glittering destination where struggle ends and freedom begins. But for those who actually tasted power, fortune, and influence, the truth is far darker. The higher you rise, the more fragile your empire becomes. You begin to see that the real game isn't about making money. It's about keeping it, protecting it, and multiplying it without losing yourself. The greatest danger to wealth isn't poverty, it's stupidity. And not the kind born from ignorance, but from arrogance. Niccolò Machiavelli, the Renaissance thinker often labeled as the godfather of strategy and manipulation, understood this centuries before Wall Street existed. He saw how powerful men built kingdoms and how, through a single foolish error, a misplaced display of pride, an act of blind generosity, or a failure to read the times, those kingdoms turned to ash. What Machiavelli knew then still holds true in today's world of billion-dollar valuations and generational wealth. The game hasn't changed, only the players have. This video unveils the 11 stupid mistakes wealthy people never make, according to a Machiavellian reading of human behavior, power, and survival. These are not finance tips. They are laws of human nature disguised as economic wisdom. Break them, and you lose everything. Understand them, and you build an empire that endures long after your name is gone. Let's begin with the first. The one mistake that destroys more fortunes than recessions ever could. 1. Believing wealth is enough without mastery of fortune. The first and perhaps most fatal error ordinary people make is believing that wealth itself is security. They mistake possession for permanence. Machiavelli, however, warned that Fortuna, the unpredictable goddess of chance, governs half of our lives. The other half belongs to our own virtue, our discipline, cunning, and capacity to adapt. When wealth becomes your shield, you stop developing the skill to face the storm. You build comfort, not control. True wealth demands a relationship with uncertainty. The truly rich don't worship stability, they anticipate chaos. They diversify, plan, and move like chess players several moves ahead, not because they're pessimists, but because they understand the dance of fortune. A Machiavellian knows that fate is a river that floods without warning. The wise build levees before the rain begins. Those who fail to master fortune find themselves drowning in their own success, unprepared when the tide turns. Look at the stories of fallen empires, from ancient dynasties to modern corporations. Every downfall begins the same way. Confidence turns into complacency. A family forgets how it built its wealth. A company believes its brand alone can carry it. A leader assumes the market will always favor him. That is the moment fortune smiles, then swiftly withdraws her hand. The wealthy who survive understand that fortune never sleeps. They remain restless, alert, and disciplined, knowing that money can be made again, but lost time and lost vigilance can never be recovered. 2. Displaying wealth ostentatiously and inviting envy. Machiavelli observed that rulers who flaunt their power too boldly awaken enemies they never needed to fight. The same principle applies to wealth. Those who show off their riches are not admired. They are studied, envied, and eventually targeted. When you broadcast your success, you also reveal your vulnerabilities. You give people a map to your weaknesses. The truly wealthy understand the difference between influence and exposure. They move quietly, build silently, and let the results of their power speak louder than their lifestyle. They drive modestly while owning everything in sight. They understand that attention is a currency far more dangerous than money because it attracts two kinds of people: opportunists and predators. Machiavelli would call this the envy of the crowd, a force that corrodes reputation, draws scrutiny, and breeds enemies in the shadows. This is why the wise rich treat invisibility as armor. They invest in privacy, not vanity. They let the illusion of normalcy protect their empire. The loud rich become memes, trends, and temporary gods of spectacle. The silent rich become institutions. In Machiavellian logic, power that doesn't need to shout is the only power that lasts. 3. Mistaking generosity for strength. Here lies one of Machiavelli's most misunderstood lessons. In The Prince, he warns rulers not to be excessively generous, for it will lead to ruin. The same applies to the wealthy who believe that endless giving earns them love or legacy. Generosity is seductive because it feels virtuous, but without restraint, it becomes a slow form of self-destruction. Machiavelli argued that generosity must be strategic. A prince who gives freely today will have to take tomorrow, and when he does, the people will hate him for it. Likewise, a wealthy person who gives without limit to friends, family, followers, or foundations ends up feeding dependency rather than discipline. The greatest benefactors give in ways that strengthen others, not weaken themselves. Strategic generosity creates allies. Blind generosity creates beggars. The wealthy who last know when to say no, even when it costs them popularity. They understand that maintaining power requires boundaries, not guilt. Machiavelli's wisdom reminds us that it's far better to be respected for restraint than loved for wastefulness. True generosity is not in giving everything away, but in preserving the means to give again. To master wealth, one must master the art of purposeful giving and the courage to walk away when giving becomes a trap. 4. Relying on others' capital or mercenary support. One of Machiavelli's sharpest warnings in The Prince is against the use of mercenaries, soldiers who fight for pay rather than loyalty. He called them useless and dangerous because their allegiance lasts only as long as the money flows. Translate that into the world of wealth, and the lesson is clear. Dependence is death. Many wealthy individuals make the grave mistake of building their fortune on other people's capital, expertise, or reputation without developing internal strength. They borrow excessively, rely on advisors without understanding their motives, or build companies that stand on the shoulders of partners they can't control. To the naive, this seems efficient. To the Machiavellian, it's suicidal. The moment the winds change, the investors pull out, the markets shift, the alliance cracks, the foundation collapses. True wealth is not borrowed, it is engineered. The enduringly rich build their empires like Machiavellian princes, with self-sufficiency as their first defense. They hire mercenaries, yes, but they never depend on them. They use other people's money only to amplify what they already control. They borrow knowledge but not responsibility, because they know that in the game of power, the moment your strength belongs to someone else, your fate does too. So the next time a wealthy man boasts of leverage, of other people's money, of partnerships that promise exponential growth, remember Machiavelli's silent grin. The clever rich use others to expand power, but never as the source of it. Dependence feels efficient in times of peace, but when war comes, mercenaries always flee first. 5. Ignoring the reputation and image of wealth. Machiavelli insisted that the appearance of power is often more decisive than power itself. It is not necessary to be virtuous, he wrote, but to appear so. To modern ears, this sounds cynical, but the insight is timeless. Perception governs influence. Wealth without a managed image is like a fortress without walls. Many who rise fast forget this. They believe numbers alone will protect them. Net worth, assets, performance. Yet their reputation erodes silently through arrogance, carelessness, or scandal. A single rumor can undo decades of work. Poorly chosen association can stain a legacy. Machiavelli would remind us that reputation is currency, and like gold, it can be debased. Once tarnished, it rarely regains its full shine. The truly wealthy operate like political masters. They curate image deliberately, knowing that in the court of public perception, belief is reality. They understand when to speak and when to disappear. They use silence as strategy. They cultivate dignity, not luxury, credibility, not clout. They understand that reputation is not about appearing perfect, but about appearing in control. This is why the wisest wealthy people don't chase virality. They don't argue online, flaunt purchases, or beg for relevance. They project stability, a quiet dominance that inspires confidence. Because the moment wealth looks desperate for validation, it loses its authority. Machiavellian wealth doesn't scream, "Look at me." It whispers, "You'll never catch me." 6. Overextending through debt or liberal spending. Machiavelli observed that a ruler who spends too freely must later burden his subjects with taxes, breeding resentment and collapse. The same principle applies in private finance. Those who spend excessively on lifestyle, houses, luxuries, and illusions of success soon find themselves enslaved to their own image. It's not poverty that ruins the rich, it's the addiction to appearing richer. Debt, when used wisely, can be a weapon. But when used emotionally, it becomes a leash. Many who gain wealth quickly believe it will never end, and so they expand their lifestyle to match their ego. They take loans not for growth, but for applause. They believe abundance is infinite, until interest and inflation remind them that fortune always collects her dues. Machiavelli would call this the tyranny of comfort, when a ruler becomes so accustomed to indulgence that he can no longer live without it, even when it destroys him. The Machiavellian wealthy do the opposite. They treat every dollar like a soldier, to be deployed, not displayed. They invest before they indulge. They understand that austerity in prosperity is not stinginess, it's foresight. They build buffers so large that fortune herself would need an army to breach them. In their world, restraint is power, because the man who can deny himself today holds dominion tomorrow. To live lavishly is easy. To live deliberately, under one's own discipline, is divine. The wealthy, who endure, follow the same law as Machiavelli's most successful princes. Spend only to strengthen your position, never to feed your vanity. 7. Ignoring the need for foundations and structures. In The Prince, Machiavelli reminds us that the strongest ruler is not the one who conquers most quickly, but the one who builds structures that outlast him. Every empire, financial or political, eventually faces storms. What decides its fate isn't how much gold it holds, but how deeply its roots are planted. The common rich think wealth is a number. The wise know it's a system, a living organism of trusts, businesses, legal armor, and principles. Those who treat wealth like water in a cup will watch it evaporate the moment heat rises. But those who build channels, reservoirs, and dams, institutions, family governance, disciplined financial habits, ensure that the river of money continues long after they're gone. Machiavelli would compare this to a prince who conquers a city but fails to establish institutions. Without law, leadership, or order, rebellion soon follows. Likewise, when a wealthy person leaves behind only assets, not structure, conflict erupts between heirs, partners, or the state itself. The wealthy who endure never confuse ownership with control. They anticipate succession, taxation, betrayal, and law. They treat wealth not as an ornament, but as a kingdom that must be defended, maintained, and administered.
True generational wealth is never accidental. It is engineered. It requires what Machiavelli called virtù, discipline, strength of will, applied not in war, but in paperwork, planning, and principle. The stupid mistake is believing that numbers alone will carry a legacy. Numbers fade, systems endure. 8. Failing to change with the times. Machiavelli's universe was defined by one relentless truth: fortune changes, and those who fail to change with it are buried beneath it. The greatest princes in his writings weren't the ones who were strongest. They were the ones who were adaptable. They could change temperament, method, even morality, when the moment demanded it.
The same applies to wealth. Many who build fortunes in one era lose them in the next. Not because they become poor, but because they become static. They cling to old industries, old strategies, old ways of thinking, while the world evolves at lightning speed. They believe the formula that once worked is eternal. Machiavelli would laugh, for he knew that fortune favors not the faithful, but the flexible. Think of the industrialist who refuses to embrace technology, the investor who mocks cryptocurrency, the brand that ignores culture shifts. In every generation, these are the victims of time. They mistake experience for wisdom and tradition for truth. The Machiavellian wealthy, on the other hand, adapt constantly. They study trends, not for fads, but for power. They move quietly into new territories, while others scoff. They change before change becomes mandatory, and that's why they survive. Fortune is like a wild river, Machiavelli wrote. It floods violently, reshaping the land. Only those who build channels for it can harness its force. The rest drown, clutching their old maps of the past. The rich who endure are not prisoners of yesterday, they are architects of tomorrow. 9. Confusing wealth with moral license. Here lies one of the most seductive delusions of power, the belief that money grants moral immunity. Many who rise to wealth begin to think the rules no longer apply, that their status exempts them from consequence. Machiavelli would call this the sin of hubris, when the ruler mistakes divine favor for permanence. In The Prince, Machiavelli never tells leaders to be evil, he tells them to be realistic. He warns that a ruler who offends too many, who acts recklessly or without calculation, will destroy himself. Not because morality demands it, but because human nature will. Power breeds resentment, and when pride blinds the powerful, enemies multiply in silence. Wealthy people who indulge every impulse, arrogance, disrespect, excess, make the same mistake. They forget that power without restraint invites ruin. The truly wealthy operate with an invisible code. They understand that power is best preserved through discipline and humility, not performative virtue, but self-governance. They do not flaunt superiority, nor treat others as beneath them, because they know perception is everything. A single scandal, a careless insult, a moral misstep can burn down what took decades to build. Machiavelli would say, "It is not necessary to be loved, but it is fatal to be hated." The wise rich know this well. They walk the fine line between command and compassion, authority and arrogance. They understand that while wealth can buy privilege, it cannot buy forgiveness. Every act, every decision, every indulgence is a test of self-control, and those who fail that test are never destroyed by their enemies, but by their own appetites. 10. Neglecting succession, legacy, and continuity. Machiavelli was obsessed with one thing above all: continuity of power. It's not enough to conquer a city, you must ensure it remains yours when you're gone. He studied rulers who built magnificent kingdoms, only to have them crumble the moment they died. Not because the empire was weak, but because it wasn't designed to outlive its creator. This same principle governs the world of wealth. The average millionaire plans for retirement, the Machiavellian wealthy plan for dynasty. The difference lies in vision. Most people build wealth for comfort, the house, the status, the symbol. The few who truly understand power build it for legacy. They know that the true test of wealth is not how much you accumulate, but how much endures when you're no longer in the room. Neglecting succession is the cardinal sin of power. It's the emperor who leaves no heir, the founder who dies without a will, the investor who never teaches his children discipline. Wealth without wisdom becomes a curse. You can pass on money, but if you don't pass on mindset, you're only funding your own destruction. Machiavelli would warn, a ruler who fails to teach his successors invites chaos, betrayal, and decay. The wise rich begin succession early. They write, they teach, they mentor, they build structures that cannot be destroyed by emotion or ignorance. Family trusts, governance systems, rules that outlast personality. Because they understand, fortune can make a man rich, but only strategy can make him eternal. In the end, legacy is not inherited, it is engineered. 11. Letting ego, vanity, or pride undermine strategy. Of all the silent killers of wealth, this is the most tragic, because it's self-inflicted. Machiavelli watched great princes fall not because of war or rebellion, but because of vanity. They wanted to be adored, to be seen as generous, heroic, even moral, and in chasing that illusion, they lost everything. The ego of the powerful is a fragile thing. It blinds them to danger and deafens them to truth. In modern wealth, pride manifests in countless ways. The entrepreneur who refuses advice because he knows better, the investor who can't admit a mistake, the magnate who believes he's untouchable. Ego turns kings into fools. It distorts perception and leads to ruin disguised as triumph. Machiavelli's warning was simple: never confuse image with reality. The more power you gain, the more ruthlessly you must examine yourself. The truly wealthy, the ones who last generations, have mastered the art of invisibility and self-restraint. They don't need applause to know their worth. They understand that silence is stronger than validation. Their decisions are driven by principle, not pride. They do not win every battle, but they win the war, because they never let emotion outrun strategy. Pride makes you predictable, and, in the Machiavellian world, predictability is suicide. The wise rich know that every decision must serve the fortress of their wealth, not the vanity of their ego. They stay low when others seek light, silent when others brag, strategic when others react. Their humility is not weakness, it is camouflage. Because those who shout their greatness invite their own downfall, while those who move in silence inherit the earth. Conclusion: The Art of Wealth according to Machiavelli. At its core, Machiavelli's wisdom is not about cruelty or manipulation, it's about clarity. He stripped away illusions about human nature and power, revealing what few dare to admit: that fortune is fickle, that human beings are envious, that wealth attracts both admiration and hatred in equal measure. His lessons are not moral, they are mechanical. They teach us how to survive the chaos of life with eyes wide open. The modern world has changed in technology but not in psychology. The same dynamics that govern princes and empires now govern boardrooms and billionaires. The same vanity, envy, and arrogance that destroyed kingdoms still destroy fortunes. The same timeless virtues, discipline, discretion, foresight, still separate the lasting from the lost. The wealthy who endure are not the luckiest or the loudest, they are the most disciplined. They see wealth not as a trophy, but as a tool. a weapon in the art of life. They avoid the 11 mistakes that Machiavelli would call fatal. They respect fortune, hide their strength, spend strategically, build foundations, adapt to change, master their ego, and prepare their legacy before death calls their name. And that is the final paradox of wealth. The more you chase to appear powerful, the weaker you become. But the more you focus on structure, mastery, and quiet control, the more unshakable your empire grows. As Machiavelli might whisper if he were alive today, Shibrata, do not seek to be rich, seek to be unruinable, because in the end, is not measured by what you possess, but by what you can never lose.